Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Black Expat Experience, a podcast highlighting the lived experiences of Black expats around the world. I'm Kendall Tyson, your host and licensed therapist, and a fellow Black expat living in Beijing currently. We have another great episode. I mean, I know I say this every time, but it's certainly going to be true this time. We have another great episode in store for you, and without further ado, I want to welcome our newest guest, Ms. Cheryl-Ann Weekes, to the show. Hi, Cheryl-Ann.
Hello, Kendall. How are you? Happy to be here.
I'm doing well. I'm so happy you're here. Like we said earlier, we kind of went through a few scheduling challenges to make sure that this interview happened. And I'm so grateful that we were able to work it out, because I know that you're going to share lots of nuggets of wisdom, you know, that I respect you profoundly. And I'm so grateful for you being here.
Thank you. Thank you. The respect is mutual. And we finally got to meet in person this summer. So that makes it even more special.
I know, it was amazing. We'll talk about Italy for sure. So as always, I want to give guests an opportunity to give us like their elevator pitch. Tell us who you are. Let's get the conversation started. So you have the floor.
All right. So I am Cheryl-Ann. I am a Barbadian-born immigrant to the US at the age of 11. I have been a counselor for the last 26 years, I think. Yeah, I stopped counting after 20. So I think 26 years. And I have lived abroad since 2010. The funny thing that people like to remind me of is I move around a lot. So even though I've only been abroad since 2010, this is my 7th school, currently living in Dubai, working at a school here, and, you know, just making it happen. I love being a Black expat. I think the best thing about it is meeting lots of great people, learning new cultures, and I am a travel addict. I always say travel is my therapy. So that's me.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I did not know that you've been abroad that long. That's good. Well, not good. I don't have a judgment. I love it. And so I want to start with this question. Having been abroad, I don't do math. So you said 2010 is 2020, 13 years. Yeah, I really don't.
Give or take. I took a sabbatical in 2022. So I wasn't anywhere in 2022.
Okay. When you finally made the decision that being an expat was the life that felt most aligned with yourself, right? I'm wondering, like, what kind of things do you feel like you had to reconcile, come to terms with? I don't even know if sacrifice is the right word. Like, what did that process look like for you?
That's a good question. That's a good first question. Good thing I anticipated that one. So I decided to go abroad in 2010 because I was working in DC public schools and I was burnt out. I was really questioning whether I still wanted to be a counselor. I had been living in DC at that point for 9 years. And I was tired. I felt like I was constantly hitting up against barriers in trying to meet kids' needs. I felt like they needed so much from me, as you know, when you work in inner city public schools, and I was giving a lot and I wasn't taking good care of myself, to be honest. I wasn't setting good boundaries. And so I was burning out. And I had a colleague who was leaving at the end of the year. This was probably like April or May. And I said to her, where are you going next year? And she says, I'm going to, I want to say it was Spain. I don't remember now. And I said, to do what? Teach English as a second language? She was like, no, to teach what I teach. And I was like, tell me more. Because I was excited.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can do this. And I said to her, are there counselor positions? She said, yeah, let me give you the name of the organization that I worked with. And so I was like, okay, I know I'm coming back in September, but I said, next year, June, that's going to be me. In my head, I said it. I didn't say it to anybody else but her and myself. And I set about the next 12 months trying to make it be me. And I did. And I went to the Dominican Republic in 2010, August. And initially, I thought that I would stay a year and go back because I was dating a guy. He was a great guy at that time. And I thought we were going somewhere, and I thought, okay, I'll just take a break. I'll take a break, I'll go, I'll get a reset, and I'll come back to DC because I loved living in the DC area. It's still my favorite place in America, one of them. And, you know, I thought, well, I'll go for a year, take a reset, come back. I never came back because I never came back. And so what I had to sacrifice was that relationship, obviously, because you can't be abroad and keep a relationship with a man in America. So I sacrificed that relationship and my relationship status because, well, you will probably ask me this question later on, but I'll just say it now. It's been hard to be in a relationship in the last 12, 13 years. I've tried, but all of those people have been either in the country I was living in and I moved, or it was someone in the US and that didn't work. So I think I sacrificed my relationship status.
Wow.
And it was okay. You know, initially I thought it would be horrible and I would be so sad, but I have created a good life outside of the US, even though I'm single.
Yeah.
Still.
Thank you for being, thank you for like that level of transparency, because as a now 42-year-old Black woman that has like a desire to be married and or partnered and maybe have kids and those things, I think one of the, and living in China, which is not conducive to the type of relationship that I'm seeking, like, was there any type of terms that you had to come like face to face with? And I don't know, it's always this thing in the back of my mind that I wonder, am I sacrificing something that for so long has been so important? And then how do you prioritize like other things in your life that make your life even more meaningful? I know
I'll say this,
a whole lot.
If you want to be married or partnered and you're currently living in a country where that is difficult to impossible, then you got to move.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is possible. I know people who have met spouses or partners abroad, but you have to be in the right country because not every country is going to present partners for Black women.
Right.
Period. Right. And so if you are in China and you're not meeting compatible people, then that means China may be
exhausted.
A place you need to leave, you know? And it's hard to know if the next place you go is going to allow you to meet someone. Right. Some people are lucky enough to meet someone at school. I have tried that. It didn't work.
Trouble.
But you keep trying because if it's something that you're interested in, you have to put yourself first. And we struggle with doing that. We struggle with putting our personal selves first. We can put our professional selves first, but we struggle with our personal selves first. So for me, I'm still hopeful, but I don't want to have kids. So I don't have that clock. You know, I just want to be partnered. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I feel like there's such a sense of liberation when like you kind of figured that part out and you're settled in it, and you know there's kind of a strategy to like living your life abroad. I think like you said, we don't necessarily know what the next destination will offer. We can do all the research, we're going to ask all the questions, but it's very much like when you get on the job as a counselor, you don't know till you start. And it's like, how do you prepare yourself for, I think one of the things I struggle with all the time is uncertainty. And so having done, you know, lived this life for 12-ish years, come to terms with lots of things along the way, what is your relationship to uncertainty? Like, how do you cope with uncertainty?
So uncertainty is my toxic best friend. You know, I don't love her all the time. She get on my nerves sometimes, but she's been part of this ride, right? I left the US in 2010. I didn't know what I was going to get in Dominican Republic. I didn't know when I left there in 2 years and went to Jamaica, I didn't know what I was going to get. And every country that I've gone to has been led with uncertainty as my toxic best friend. She's there along for the ride. She's like, I'm not going anywhere, right? And so I've had to make peace with her. it does not mean that I don't have moments where I'm just like,
yeah,
get away from me. But anyone who has done the expat journey and has moved around a lot, uncertainty is part of that package. I think it's why people tend to go places and stay for a long time. Like I've met people here in Dubai who have been here 8, 10 years. They ain't going nowhere. They
what?
decided this is where you want to be, you know, and I'm not mad at it because I understand that the uncertainty can be a lot. For me, I've just had to embrace it because the reason I've moved around a lot is because I haven't found the place yet where I am safe emotionally,
Talk
support
about safety.
emotionally in the schools is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And accepted just as I am. So until I find that school that does that, I will continue to move.
You just lit my fire because I feel like this is going to be a real emotional conversation. So like the pre-conversation was definitely lit. And we're going to come back to what you just said about that sense of safety and belonging and acceptance, like unconditional acceptance. Like they want the excellence that we provide, but I also need you to create an environment and sustain an environment that allows me to continue to be excellent. That's why you brought me. So before we get into that, I do want to ask you, like, being a veteran in this space, what's something that like you're really proud of that you've been able to accomplish?
I am proud of the fact that when I left Maryland in 2010, I had really bad boundaries. Like I said, that's why I was burnt out. And what I've done in these last 10 plus years is I have developed better boundaries. I have developed better practices for mental health. I have developed a better personal life in terms of rest and relaxation. I have prioritized myself, right? And that was really hard when I lived in the US. For whatever reasons, I had to learn the lesson. I had to put things in place. I didn't want to upset people. I wanted to keep relationships that were harmful. Whatever reasons, I was not taking good care of myself. Now I prioritize that and I say no a lot because no to me is a complete sentence. I don't have to explain to you why I say no.
Right.
You know, one of the things that I am really good at is saying, no, I don't want to do that.
I love it. I love it. What do you recognize were some things that you had to shift in? One, to recognize like I'm worthy of setting boundaries, right? I'm worthy of prioritizing my wellness. I'm worthy of having sustained mental health. Like, how did you do that? What were some realizations that you had to engage in?
I think once I realized how burnt out I realized that when I went to the next place, I needed to do some things differently. Now, I will tell you this, the DR was the perfect place for me. It was like God said, go there because that school is going to teach you about boundaries. Because here's what I'll tell you. My first principal from the DR, Adam Slayton, he's one of my best friends now. He's one of the best people that I know. And him and I could be no different. He is a white boy from Oregon.
Woo, he white.
Yes. But what happened in the first couple of months is we clicked, him and we clicked. And he became a supporter. He became someone who allowed me to be my full self, even though he didn't always understand me. Right. He became someone who encouraged me in setting boundaries. So one of the great things about the DR is people would go to lunch at lunch. Like the principal went to lunch, the head of school went to lunch. People would go sit in the cafeteria and eat. And so he would come knock on my door and be like, come eat your lunch. That kid can come back. They can come back after lunch. You know, and so I got into the habit of eating my lunch at a regular time. And it sounds like such a small thing, but I didn't used to do that. I used to be eating lunch at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, running somewhere else, you know? And one of the things I learned in the DR is that it was okay to tell a kid, I am going to eat my lunch. You're not in crisis. Yeah. Come back later.
Right.
And I'm going to go sit in the cafeteria, not eat at my desk, but sit in the cafeteria and eat with my colleagues and socialize. I have not seen that in that way in any of the other schools. So that's why it was great, because it allowed me to set boundaries. And I was supported in that by the administration, right? Because they were setting similar boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, he was the same in being like, okay, well, go home now, you know. Everybody, let's go. And he stayed, you know, he got there earlier, but he encouraged us to leave. Tomorrow's another day, you know. And so I think that relationship, that friendship with him, but also the way that that school was set up to honor boundaries made it easier for me to set them. And
Oh,
so, like, I teach about boundaries. I have a consulting business. And one of the things that I hear from educators when I tell them about boundaries is, yeah, it's easy to set boundaries in my personal life, but at work, it's harder. And you know why? Because there's a big consequence if you try to set a boundary and the people that you work with or your SLT
yeah.
does not respect your boundaries. Then you have to make a decision. And so as we talk about the importance of boundaries, we have to talk about the importance of schools becoming spaces that allow people to set boundaries, that respect those boundaries, because otherwise it's really hard to do.
It is. Oh man, there's so many threads in what you just said. And I love it for you. I remember you telling us about your, Adam, right?
Yes,
Like
Adam.
the summer in Italy, y'all. Italy was everything. I'm just gonna say that. I'm not gonna tell you about it though. Like I love that for you, because having supportive administration and administration who may not fully get it, but respects and trusts you enough, right? Your judgment enough to support you and push you and help you align with things that grow you, I think. Makes so much sense. As you were describing like the whole lunch thing, I feel so attacked because like, I never thought of that as like a boundary violation, but after listening to you describe it, it's just like, yeah, is it an intentional thing? And so I'm trying to make this connect because my brain is darting all over the place when you talk about the boundaries and the connecting with colleagues, taking time and safety. To me, those things cannot be extrapolated. They are all intertwined. And then I asked myself as I was listening to you, why don't you do that often? Why don't you take the food that you go get from Jamaica Blue, go into the cafeteria, eat with colleagues? And it really just kind of dawned on me, like, there's not many colleagues that I feel safe around. There are some that I do, but then when I think about maybe some sensory issues that I have, the cafeteria is always sensory overload for me, and I need like a quieter space. And so to honor that, I've kind of separated myself in regard, but then it's hard to continue to build those connections. So I feel like there's so much work that I need to unpack just by listening to you say those very, I can't even say simple because they're not simple, they're very layered things. How do you continue to like honor your boundaries, especially when being in a space that doesn't really care?
So I'll say this. And I tell people about my boundary. It doesn't mean you have to do your boundary the exact same. So if you can't eat in the cafeteria or the staff lounge, don't do it. I don't always eat in the cafeteria or the staff lounge. That was that first school. Now I go sometimes. And right now, because it's so hot that you can't be outside here in Dubai, I go and I eat in the staff lounge. But when it cools down, I go outside and I sit by myself, because for really, the boundary I want is quiet time at my lunchtime where I'm not talking, because I'm talking to people and children all day. So for me, my lunch has become a quiet time. So now I prefer to sit outside and eat my lunch, you know, but I can't. So now I go and sit in the teacher's lounge. But when it cools down, most of the days I'll be outside with my lunch in the sun, in a quiet place, eating lunch, because what I don't want, and this is a boundary I had to set as well, is people talking to me about work stuff while I'm eating.
Yeah.
So I used to tell this funny story where at one of my schools, and I don't remember which one it was now, a teacher saw me eating outside and she came towards me. She was like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I caught you, as I have a fork to my mouth. And when I finished chewing, I said, you didn't catch me because I'm eating my lunch. I said, and I'm sure whatever you're about to tell me is really important. I said, but can I ask you to do something? I said, can you send me an email or come to my office when I'm finished eating my lunch? I said, because if you tell me now, by the time I finish eating my lunch, I won't remember. And then I can't follow up with you properly. I said, so can you please do that? So that was a boundary I had to set, right? Because just because you see me sitting outside eating my lunch does not mean it's a time for you to come and talk to me about Joey. Send me an email. Tell me to come to your classroom. Ask me when I can come by your office. Now, if it's a crisis, different, right? Now, we've all, as counselors, we've had our lunches interrupted by crises. That's different.
Yeah.
But if it's not a crisis, you can send me an email because I'm eating my lunch and I like to take that 30 minutes to just be quiet or talk about something non-work related.
Yeah.
And so that's a boundary I've had to set as well.
I'm trying to remember, like when we went to dinner at that really nice restaurant. Did we talk about work? I do not remember.
We didn't.
Good food.
We didn't, because that's also one of my boundaries, right? Like when I hang out with people from work, I'm always like, I don't want to talk about kids. And when they start, I remind them, I'm the one in the group, the obnoxious one in the group who's being like, we're talking about kids again. I don't want to talk about kids while I'm drinking.
Yeah, right.
So I have, that's another boundary that I've set. And I set it with my friends too. You know, my friend Laura and I worked together in Egypt, and we used to take a taxi home on Fridays. We would take an Uber because we didn't want to wait for the bus. And so she would get in the car and I would tell her, you have 10 minutes to tell me whatever it is you want to tell me that has to relate to school. And then we're done because it's Friday.
Right.
So she knew every Friday, if she was frustrated about something, she needed to talk about it. Okay, go, you got 10 minutes. And then our weekend starts, right? Because for me, what I needed to learn how to do for my own mental health was disengage from work all the time, from talking about work all the time, from worrying about kids all the time, from coming up with solutions all the time. And if I was hanging out with work people and they were constantly talking about kids, I couldn't do that. Right. And so I felt that anxiety in me coming up. And so I had to set that boundary to be like, if we're going to hang out, I don't want to talk about kids. I want to hang out. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because educators are always going to find a way to bring work and children into the mix. And so I think being able to identify what works for you and being confident in that. Have you received like have you had to deal with any type of blowback or misunderstandings or feelings from others from setting your boundaries?
Of course. And that's the thing with boundaries, right? And that's why I tell people setting boundaries is hard and it's uncomfortable. And it's always going to be that. Yeah. Whether it's your sister or your mother or your spouse or your partner or your colleagues or your supervisor, you are going to have to set that boundary multiple times. Because the first time you say it, people say, yeah. And then they go ahead and breach that boundary in the next 10 seconds.
Right.
So you have to be willing to say it multiple times, right? And then you have to be willing to take an action. So for me, I say it, and if people don't like it, it's okay, because you and I don't have to hang out.
Right.
Right? Like I can go do something else. And I will keep setting that boundary a couple of times. And then I'll say, you know what? I don't think we should hang out, because every time we hang out, you talk about kids and I don't want to. And you don't seem to understand it, and it's okay. But I don't want to. So I'm not going to hang out with you outside of work.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not making anyone feel bad for choosing to engage differently. Do you? But guess what? I'm going to do me. And doing me means I don't want to talk about children outside of work. So if you can't respect that and engage with that, it's okay. I'm not going to make you feel bad about it, but I'm just not going to hang out with you.
Yeah. I appreciate that distinction. And I'm wondering, like, if once we begin to have a really good sense of who we are, what we need, and like the things that we don't want, I think things tend to streamline a little bit more. But we live in a people-pleasing culture, right? And as Black women, and I can say this specifically for myself, I think when I was younger, I felt the need to, I want to be liked, right? Because I was often the only Black girl or one of few, right? Really outspoken, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And as time moved on like it does, there's like a level of feeling isolated and misunderstood. And so then there's that decision to maybe not be as honest with what you need and what you want for the desire to have people in your life, whether they work for you or not. And I think over time, I'm getting to the question. It's as we learn more about ourselves, as we're more comfortable in who we are, understanding what we need. I wonder, like, what would you share with someone when it comes to understand the difference between being respected and accepted than liked because you're people pleasing, and how that keeps the right people in your life? I don't know if that question made sense or not.
It's tough. So I'll tell you one other thing that I had to make peace with as being an expat is that I'm an introvert. And people who work with me in the US, when I say that, they don't believe it because I used to put myself on display. I was constantly trying to be this, that, this, and the other, right? To be accepted. But what I started to learn how to do once I was an expat, I could reinvent myself and I could be who I was. And really, at my core, I'm an introvert. And I think the first time I really acknowledged it was when my sister said something to me on the phone, and she was like, "You don't even like people that much." She said, "I'm surprised you're doing all of that." She was like, "You like to be alone."
Like, stop calling me out.
Oh my goodness, you are right. But I was doing all of these things, going to happy hours, all of that, all the things I didn't want to do because I didn't want to be seen as standoffish or not friendly. And it was wearing me out, And what I realized once I became an expat is that I could say that I was an introvert. I could be that introvert and people could still accept me. It didn't always work. Some people stopped inviting me to things, and I was like, it's okay. Because the truth is, I didn't want to put myself on display anymore. I wanted to be myself. And that means sometimes you're going to invite me somewhere and I'm going to want to come, but I'm going to change my mind an hour before I'm supposed to go. And I'm going to be like, I'm not coming.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I don't have the capacity right now.
Yeah.
Right. Or another thing that I learned in the DR is I would go home on Fridays and take a nap. Because we lived in this really small community, nothing was around. We would go to this one taco place. It was the only thing in walking distance because most of us didn't have cars. And the tacos were horrible. The drinks were horrible, but it was just our way of doing something on Fridays. And I would be like, okay, I'm gonna come, but I'm gonna come at 6:30. And the first time somebody said, well, why? We get out of school at 3:30. And I was like, I need to go take a nap. I've been talking all day and I'm exhausted. So if I'm gonna come and be social, I need a break.
Yeah.
And you know what happened? They didn't judge me for it. They were like, okay. And so I would show up at 6:30 every other Friday or whenever, and they were happy to see me. And nobody came and knocked on my door at 4 o'clock and was like, hey, we're going early. You wanna come? They left me alone and they were happy to see me at 6:30. And I didn't get judged for it. And that was another lesson in that I could be who I am. I could be that introvert who needed to recharge and still come and socialize. And they were just as happy with me. The other example that happened in the DR was my friend Lucy. She lived upstairs. She was a French teacher. And we used to go to the beach. She had a car. She was one of the people that had a car. And so she would be like, okay, I want to go to the beach on Sunday. Let's go. And I said, yes. And she would be like, what time's good for you? Instead of saying, I have the car, I'm going to go at this time. She said to me, what time is good for you? And I said to her, well, I watch my church online and that starts at 11. And so 1, and she was like, yeah, okay. Again, me being myself, I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to forego watching my church. She was like, okay, I'll come down at 1:15. And we would go to the beach on Sundays at 1:15. So for me, Like, that's why I said it felt like God sent me to the DR, even though it was a hard transition. Because personally, I was allowed to be myself and people accepted me for that. They didn't judge me. They didn't make me feel bad about it. They didn't make comments. They didn't exclude me. She said, 1 o'clock's good for you? Okay, I'll see you at 1 o'clock. She didn't say, well, we're going at 11, so I guess you're not going. Or we're going at 11, so if you want to go.
Right, bend to our will.
So I was allowed to be myself, right? And I was allowed to take time for myself. And I was allowed to not have to put myself on display for other people because they said, we see who you are, you're different than us, but it's okay. We like it.
Yeah. Again, I love that for you. I think I kind of want to stay on the whole community aspect of being an expat. It's challenging to find like your
Yes.
people.
Yes.
And especially because we're blending all these different cultures, these understandings of people, ourselves, you know, coming to terms with certain things, what works, what doesn't. Are we going to lose people if we honor the fullness of who we are? And if we don't, do we even feel connected? So like, what would you share with someone other than, you know, in addition to what you have shared already, as they move into a new place or as they're trying to branch out and connect with more people? Like, what would be some suggestions that you'd offer for them to kind of be strategic, I think, maybe in that effort?
I say find your tribe because I think it's important to find your people because in the DR, it was Lucy and Adam for me, right? Like I hung out with other people, but I knew the two of them accepted me as my quirky, introverted, sometimes moody self, and they were okay with it, right? You have to find your tribe. And one of the things I also encourage now that I know better is having that tribe be comprised of people outside of work,
Oh,
right?
yes.
So it's important that your community is fine. If you find your work best friend and that's your person, like I said, Lucy and Adam was mine. But when I went to Jamaica and when I went to other countries, it was important to me to find people from outside of work to also be part of my community, right? Because that's different. And so I would say find a community outside of work. So here in Dubai, I forgot where I was. I found people outside of work. I've joined communities outside of work. Like I joined this Black clinicians group and we went to brunch on Sunday. And that was nice because they don't work at my school. We don't talk about work. We talked about books. We talked about our summer. You know, I've met people through other people. And like the two women I'm going out to brunch with today, we don't work together. Again, they're women outside of school. So find your people outside of work. I think it's important to find that because that's the community that you're going to need the most, right? And I'm not saying that you can't find a work best friend. I'm not saying that. But for me, it's always been more important to find people who don't work at my job to build relationships with.
Yes.
And I did the same thing in Egypt, and it was wonderful. You know, we had a whole group of women. Some of us worked in schools, some of us didn't, but we got together, and that was my community. So find a community. AIELOC for me is a community as well. For those of you who don't know what AIELOC is the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color, and it's an online community. I haven't met most of those people in person yet, right? But we have these groups, you know, and I've made a community. Some of us is connected outside of AIELOC, but that's a community as well. We're all educators, we're all expats of color all over the world, but we come together through these online meetings and workshops to talk about the things we have in common. And then we know that if I need to talk to somebody, I can talk to that person. So figure out where your communities are in your countries and meet your people.
Yeah. Didn't they like just have I want to say a meetup on the 20th, is it the 23rd? I think it was one recently.
So it was the advocacy circle, which is the one that I volunteered. I am part of two groups in AIELOC. So the advocacy circle started last year, and it basically is we meet once a month. I coordinate that, or supervise it, or facilitate it is probably the best word. And we come and we talk about an issue that we're having at school. Sometimes I bring a topic, and sometimes I let the topic be led by whoever is in that community that day. So, and we don't, it's only for BIPOC people because AIELOC has some other members. And we talk about whatever we want to talk about, whatever problem we're having. And it's a community to have someone help you come up with solutions for how you deal with that. The other group that I'm part of is a self-care group. And that started, I think, during COVID, because we were all stuck in our apartments, and we started having that, a self-care group where we talked about boundaries and self-care and mental health and all of that. That is still continuing. We don't meet every month anymore, but before we used to meet every month, and we would talk about a topic about self-care. So whether it was boundaries, whether it was therapy, whether it was coping mechanisms, whether it's yoga and breathing and all of that, but how you prioritize your self-care. And so AIELOC, as a result of that, became a community for me, even though it was an online community.
Yeah. Like, I think just in the age that we live in right now, it's so important wherever we can find like healthy connection, even if it's parasocial, is really going to help us to continue to thrive and do well. I mean, plus we travel all over the world, so it's just people that we can connect with when we go places. I think I was going to join the 23rd Advocacy Circle, but that night I had friends throw me a celebration for my birthday. So I'm going to join the next one because Lord knows I need it.
Well, happy belated birthday. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you said so much. Like, what do you believe as far as being a part of I learned this term, I don't know what podcast I was listening to, but I use it effusively now, a constellation of care. And like your support system, the people, the resources, everything that wraps you to keep you mentally well functioning, present. What are some things that you believe like people need to be able to, I don't know, what would you suggest to other Black women? Because that's our demographic right now that we're talking about. Other BIPOC individuals, folks that listen to this show, what would be like some suggestions that you offer when it comes to the importance of how community really does impact your mental health? I know you said before, being in a space with people that really see you, that accept you, you know, aren't trying to change you, align with your boundaries. I just find it hard to start sometimes. I've not moved anywhere but here. But like, so let's say somebody moves to a new country, they're coming their first birth abroad. What do you believe that looks like?
I think it looks different for everyone. And I know that starting is hard because, like I said, as an introvert, I don't really want to make new friends, to be honest. I find it really difficult. And my friends, my day ones, find that hard to believe because they're like, but you're so great. I said, I know, but I've known y'all 20 years, 30 years, right? So one of the challenges for me, because I've moved around a lot, is that I always had to make new friends, and I don't love it. But what I know is that for my own mental health, I need to get out of my apartment and I need to connect with someone in that country outside of work. Yeah. And so I push myself. So what I tell people is, even if you are introverted, shy, find it hard to make new friends, go to groups, right? So like this Black clinicians group, we're not necessarily friends yet, but we met twice. We've gone to brunch twice, and I forced myself to go. And these women are lovely. So it's not about them. It's that, like I said, the introvert in me is like, I said I was gonna go, but now I don't feel like going. So I push myself to go. Every time and the 2 times I've gone, it's been great, right? So I tell people, if making individual friends is hard, join groups. Every country we know has an expat group. A lot of them have Black expat groups, if that's what you're looking for. Join those. Go to events, you know. If you are an extrovert, go to events and meet new people. You know, there's always these things happening. But I think it's important to have your tribe, which sometimes will be back in America or in another country. Hold on to those people, because those are the people that know you the best, that you can be your full self with, right? Who you can be angry with, who you can be fed up with, who you can be heartbroken with, right? Because you're not going to necessarily do that with your new friends yet. But also stretch yourself, go beyond your comfort zone, and meet new people. And it doesn't mean you have to tell them all your business. It doesn't mean they have to be your best friends, but go to those events, meet people. Because if we spend all our time at work and then in our apartments, we're not growing, we're not getting the fullness of that culture, right? So you have to leave your apartment. And in order to do that, you have to go out and meet people, even if it's hard. The other thing that I would say is prioritize rest.
Yes.
Educators are phenomenally bad at boundaries and rest, because we want to save the world. That's why we became, you know, educators.
Right.
And so what we tend to do is we work too much. We think about work even when we're not at work. We talk about work even when we're not at work. What we have to do is prioritize rest. And that's different for each of us. So my resting may be some weekends I don't leave my apartment. I am just as happy to be here watching Netflix, listening to music, reading a book, talking to my sister, talking to one of my friends in the US, and I'm perfectly happy. But I prioritize rest. I sleep in on the weekends. Even if I don't sleep in, I lay in the bed. I may read, I may listen to music, but I don't jump up and start going. Some of us want to be busy all the time. And we have to ask ourselves, why do I need to be busy all the time? Why can't I rest? I just had a conversation about this with one of my friends. You know, it's just like, rest doesn't mean we're lazy. You got to recharge. And how can you recharge if you don't rest?
Yeah.
So we have to prioritize rest. The other thing we have to do is prioritize mental health. And that means whether it is therapy or listening to a podcast or listening to the Calm app or yoga or breathing techniques, mindfulness, whatever it is, we have to prioritize our mental health in that way, because a lot of us tend to push things aside. We don't deal with it. And a lot of us don't believe in therapy. And that's been my soapbox for the last 26 years, telling people that they need to go to therapy. I myself have a therapist, right? And I've gone to therapy more since I've been an expat than I did when I lived in the US. Because again, in the US, we don't really talk about therapy in our community, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about Jesus, we talk about praying and God will fix it. We talk about, you know, that. And the truth is, yes, I'm not saying that religion is bad. I'm not saying that, because my mother would be very upset at me right now. But here's what I tell people. You can have Jesus and a therapist. The two are not at odds with each other, right? You can do both, right? Because there's some things that you can get from religion and there's some things that you can get from therapy.
Yes.
Right? So therapy is important. The other thing that I like to tell people, I follow this group called Melanin and Mental Health on social media.
I love them.
Yeah. And I love them because they give you these little nuggets, but they're in small bite sizes, right? And so one of the posters or thing, whatever they call it, it says, you don't have to be in crisis to go to therapy. Because that's what we think, I don't need therapy because I'm not heartbroken about anything. I'm sleeping well. I'm thriving. But the truth is, what therapy does for you, it helps you to look at your life in a examined, intentional way and decide where you can be better.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can all be better. Yeah. Right? And then if you are having a crisis, then therapy is even better. My grandmother died in February and I was gutted, I've been a counselor a long time, but I wasn't sleeping. I was crying all the time. I was crying at work, which is the worst thing for me. Like, I was crying at work. The vice principal came in probably the week after she died to check on me, and I just started crying, like the ugly cry. I'm not talking like silent tears. I'm like, heaving, crying. And this woman was so uncomfortable. I felt so bad for her because here she is. She came to be like, I heard your grandmother died. I just came to check on you. And I just, that poor lady just sat there and she was like, okay, well, I'm going to close the door. I said, okay. So I went back to therapy.
Yeah.
Because I needed to talk through my grief. And I didn't necessarily want to do it with my friends because they didn't understand, right? Because a lot of them felt like, well, we're sorry that Gran is gone, but she lived to be 94. And so you were lucky, you were blessed to have her because most of them didn't have grandmothers anymore. So I understood it from their point of view, but I needed to talk to somebody. I needed to be able to feel my grief and not have to minimize it. So I got a therapist. So I tell people all the time, therapy is important. It helps you become better. So prioritize that.
Yes. And I think you just said a whole lot, like one, recognizing being an expat, therapy is an option, and making sure that you're working with somebody reputable, whether that's wherever you are in the country, that they're licensed, or if that's connecting with a therapist back in the States, which a lot of them do still provide services and support for us that live abroad. It is sometimes coming to the realization like, I need it. I need this additional help. And how do I process what I believe that might mean to me, right? What are the internal narratives that I'm having to correct about being Black, BIPOC, and needing to talk to somebody, right? What are the cultural things that I got to let go, that keep me from doing this very thing that's going to help me to thrive in this new place that I've chosen to live. And I find that to be, go ahead.
What are the family stuff that I need to fix? Because we all have generational stuff that we carrying on because somebody said this is the way to thrive. Somebody said this is the way to go. Somebody said, and there are things that we haven't healed. The other thing that I like is another person that I follow, and I can't remember, I think this is Alex L. She wrote a book about how to heal.
Yeah, I love it.
And one of her little nuggets as well says something like, give yourself permission to heal from the same thing more than once. That, because we think healing is a one-time thing, like it's a Netflix show. We go through the 8 episodes and then we good, we done with it. I don't need to heal from it anymore. But the truth is, different experiences and things will trigger things that you thought you healed from.
Yes.
And you got to go back and heal from that thing again, or the part of it that you didn't address. So give yourself permission to do that, and to know that when things come up, you don't have to say, well, I already healed from that. That shouldn't be coming up. It's coming up for a reason. Heal from that again. Some of those family things that we thought we made peace with, they come back, and we need to heal from those things, right? And maybe therapy is not for you because you feel like it's too expensive. It's not accessible.
Maybe not individual therapy.
That's fine, but figure it out. Figure out a way to not to deal with that thing that is coming up again. Don't push it away and say, well, that's something from when I was 11, so I'm over it. Because if you were over it, it wouldn't come up again.
Woo. I know
if you were healed from it, it would happen and you would be able to talk about it without the tears and the anxiety. That's how I know I've healed from something. When I can talk about that thing and it does not gut me.
Exactly.
I've had a lot of things happen to me over the years as a kid, as a young adult. I can now talk about those things in the same feeling that I'm talking to you right now. It does not leave me shattered because I've really healed from those things. The other thing that they will say that you know that you've healed from something is when you don't expect it to be different anymore. You're not talking about like, but I wish it would have, you accept that it happened and you accept whatever lesson you learned from it. Even if the only lesson that you learned is, I don't want to do that again.
Right.
That's still a lesson. So then you figure out, how do I avoid having to do that again? Have that experience again, right? But the healing it takes time. And like I tell people, you can't go around a thing, you got to go through it. So that means tears, anger, angst, all of it. It's ugly. The
Yeah.
healing is ugly and it's uncomfortable, but you have to go through it to truly heal for something.
I hope everybody is when people see the episode, I hope that they are catching all the wisdom that you are dropping right now, especially when it comes to therapy. Like, therapy saved my life.
Mine too.
Even being a clinician, when I say like therapy saved my life, like you shared, there were some difficult things that you experienced, have traumas in my past that as a 42-year-old woman, healing still from certain things that come up that you think, oh, I didn't think that was still bothering me. Oh, but I'm in a new place, right? I have new external environment and triggers and stressors and things that are happening. And it is really to, as you're saying, instead of questioning why, it is, okay, I noticed what's happened. I notice I'm reacting to it. What am I going to do about it? Who am I connecting to in order for me to work through that? And y'all, your friends are not your therapists.
No, they're not.
Most of my friends need therapy too.
No, we are not. I'll tell you a funny story with one of my friends when I lived in DC. And she was someone I worked with. And when we became really good friends, and she would call me sometimes and she would say, I don't want to talk to Cheryl-Ann, I want to talk to the therapist. And so we had this little funny thing that I would be like, look here, girl, I'm not your therapist. But that's how she would let me know, I don't want to talk to you as my friend. I need some targeted help and I want to talk to the counselor. And so we went back and forth with that. It didn't happen a lot, but it was our kind of inside joke that she would let me know, I ain't calling to just tell you about my day. I got a problem and I need you to help me work through it. Or I need to confront somebody and I need you to tell me exactly what to say. And she would actually write down what I said.
That's good.
And then go and talk to the person, right? So that was funny. But the truth is, at some point, her and I had to have a conversation like, you're gonna have to get a therapist, honey, because this is not, it doesn't work. First of all, your friend can't be a therapist because they love you too much, right?
We are biased.
And you're not gonna take some things from them, right?
Exactly.
There's some things that I'm gonna tell you that you're not gonna wanna hear from me as someone that loves you. Right. It's better to hear it from a therapist. So do not use your counselor friends as therapists. Get a therapist.
That's a good boundary. Well, all boundaries are good, but that is a really
an important one.
Exactly.
Who are counselors.
Exactly. Especially if we want to stay in relationship or friendship with someone, that has to be established. And that's hard for us as well, too, because it's hard to turn off, like I really believe like being a counselor, therapist, a clinician is not just a job. It's literally a part of who we are as people. And it's really difficult to step outside of that mode of being. I think that's why it's hard to date sometimes, because when men find out, so what do you do? I'm like, I'm a therapist. Oh, are you analyzing me right now? Well, I wasn't.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes and no. And so my friends, that's something I also had to learn, right? That's a boundary that I had to learn, because my friends would be like, I don't want you therapizing me. Like, you're talking to me like a counselor right now.
Right.
So I had to put that check as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a boundary that I had to set for someone, it's also a boundary that I had to set for myself. Yeah. So that when I was talking to my friends, that I didn't always have to talk to them like the counselor. I had to talk to them like Cheryl-Ann, the person that loves them. So it's on both ends, right? So yes, I analyze you, but I don't always say what I think because I'm your friend.
I got to work on that.
And part. If I'm dating, hell yes, I'm analyzing you on the first, second, and third date. If we get to the third date, I'm writing things down when I get home in my journal. Like, yeah, I had that.
Red flag, green flag.
You got mommy issues. You got mommy issues.
Yeah, glimmers. What do we call them now? Glimmers. The glimmers.
But the thing is, it's part of being aware, right? Yeah. We all need to be self-aware, which means that we need to pay attention to the things that trigger us and how we respond to them so that we can get better at it. And so we can set better boundaries with people we love, but also with ourselves. Like when I talk to people, I tell them, yes, work boundaries are great. Personal boundaries are great, but what about them boundaries you set with yourself? And most people are like, what? Oh yeah, you got to set boundaries with yourself too, right? Like me and my sister have this funny thing that we say when we want to go somewhere where we can't afford it. Like my wallet said, stay home.
I need that. You need to make a hashtag on that one. Put that one on your Instagram.
Where are you going, man? My wallet says, no, you're not going to that. Because guess what? You can't afford it. That's a boundary I set with myself.
Yeah.
Or on the weekends, I like to stay up at night. But can I stay up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and not be gutted the next day? No, that's a boundary I set with myself. Take your butt to bed, Cheryl-Ann. You can do that every once in a while, but not every Friday and Saturday. You're gonna be up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. That's a boundary I set with myself, right? Relationships. If you are in relationships where you have a friend who is constantly using you to complain and do things for them, that's a boundary you set with yourself. I can't talk to you right now. I don't have the emotional capacity for it. Yeah. You know?
That part.
Or don't answer your phone. A lot of us, like, we can't not answer our phones. Like, you don't have the capacity right now. I don't have to explain it. I'm not going to answer you till I'm ready.
Yeah.
That's a boundary set with myself. You know, so the thing is, there are lots of boundaries that we need to set, but it's not just one-sided. Yeah. It's not just outward. It's also, we need to set some better boundaries with ourselves in order to be healthy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you said. And sometimes, you know, I think the hardest thing to do is to really take assessment of yourself in a compassionate way and recognize that I can grow in these areas and that's okay, right? Because when we start to judge and, you know, why am I still at this point in my life? And sometimes we really have to come to the realization, are we getting in our own way? But to have that compassionate assessment, and if you want to include other people, make sure they are people that are unconditionally supportive and empathetic. Like, criticism does not help for us to grow. And I wonder, I feel like sometimes that's a mainstay in our community, that we push, we criticize because we want to prepare you for the world. But no, I need you to be loving and kind and supportive. The world is cruel enough. I don't need it here too.
That. So we're rough with each other. We are rough, right? And that's a Caribbean term. I don't know what you would say in America. That's what we would say in the Caribbean. You're so rough, right? Because it's just like, I don't need you to talk to me that way. Okay, if I do something wrong, you can be like, Cheryl-Ann, you didn't have to do it, but when you be like, ugh, right? So the thing is, we need to be gentle in our criticism, right? With ourselves and with the people that we love. Yeah. You can tell someone they need to work on something without being so rough, right? Without being mean, without showing disdain for it. So we need to be gentle. That's what I tell the kids. Be gentle in your criticism with yourself and with the people that you love. I love that. I can say, I need to work in that area. But I don't have to be like, oh my God, I'm so horrible. I'm never good at this. All these mean things that we say to ourselves. The other thing that I tell students is, treat yourself like you would treat the person you love the most in your life. Yes. Right? Because whether that's your mom, whether it's your grandma, whether it's your best friend, whether it's your daddy, whether it's your sister, you're not going to talk to your sister all rough, right? But we talk to ourselves that way. We don't think, let me just give myself grace. Yeah. Ooh. Yes, I can get better at that, but I don't need to beat myself down to change, to grow. Yeah. Be gentle. Give yourself grace.
It is absolutely okay. Like, our diasporic community can definitely benefit from just loving ourselves in a more gentle manner.
More gentle manner. The world out there is hard enough. Yes. We don't need to emulate that in our houses, right? Our houses should be soft spaces, safe spaces, gentle spaces. Yes. That's how our love should be. It shouldn't be tough love. Nobody needs tough love. Nobody. No. The world out there is tough. Have inside not be tough. You don't need to prepare me for the world by emulating what happens out there. What happens inside should be different than what happens out there. There's a
Right.
lot of that in parenting that we see in Black households in America, especially. I gotta be tough. I gotta be tough because the world out there is not gonna give them any breaks. And that is exactly why you should be the opposite.
We need landing, a soft landing, peace, support.
Yeah.
I be wondering, like, when we think about, let's say when we turn 18 and a lot of Black households, oh, the plate broken, you got to go, you either got to go work, got to go to school, the military. And then when I hear about other cultures where, like, and I'm sure this might be cultures within our own diasporic culture as well, where they stay home, that, you know, go to school until like you're absolutely prepared and ready. I've always wondered why, and this is very general, are we so quick to push out and not like just wrap around? I don't even know what I'm trying. I know what I'm trying to ask. I don't know how to articulate it.
I think it's something that we've learned, right? So that's a generational curse is what I would call it.
Right.
Because we parent the way we were parented. So let's say I'll use my grandmother. My other grandmother died in July. So I lost both of them this year, which was a lot. It was hard.
Right. I'm so sorry.
Someday I just sit and I think, I can't believe I don't have any more grandmothers. Like I lost both of them, one in February, one in June. But I remember last summer, 2022, having some conversations with my grandmother then. And some of the ways she parented that were harmful was because that was the way she was parented. So I'm not sure that she even took the time to self-evaluate and say that I don't want to raise my children that way, right? But that's how you break that chain, is by sitting down, thinking about it, becoming self-aware. That's why being self-aware is really important. Because when you're self-aware, you notice the things that harmful, your habits, your mistakes, and then you say, how do I go forward from this? So if you felt like I don't have a good relationship with my mother because of some of her parenting styles, you're not going to parent your kids in the same way, because you're going to want to create a different relationship. And my sister, my younger sister, Nicole, did that excellently. Excellently, right? And it doesn't mean that she's a perfect parent, but she was intentional about raising my niece, Amani, different than we were raised.
Right.
She was intentional.
Yeah.
Right. And so Amani is a wonderful young lady because she was raised with love and softness and hugs and kisses and being told that she was amazing and being told she could do anything, right? That's what kids need. They don't need to be told, if you don't work hard, you're going to end up, they know that already, right? They need someone who is going to hug and kiss them and tell them that they're great and tell them that, yeah, you failed at that, but you can do it. Keep trying.
And I love you still.
Or I'm here no matter what happens, you know?
That part.
I remember saying that to her, you know, and her mother said it all the time. It doesn't matter what mistakes you make. I'm not going anywhere. Kids need to hear that. Adults need to hear that.
Yes.
You know, because as adults, sometimes we can be so judgy that even in our jobs, and you and I can talk a lot about this, telling kids when they make mistakes, all right, you're a teenager, you're gonna do dumb stuff. It doesn't mean you're not gonna get a consequence for that, but it means that I'm not gonna hold that thing over you for the next 365 days.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you learn the lesson. I'm gonna let you have a consequence. I'm going to talk about what you need to do differently, and then I'm going to allow you to learn that, knowing that it's going to take you time. But I'm not going to beat you over the head with your mistake for the next 365 days. And a lot of times we do that, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is we're constantly reminding people of who they used to be. Even when we've changed, you know, like when I meet with people who I went to high school with, they always want to talk about what it was like in high school. I'm 50 years old. And so I don't engage in that conversation because I am not that person anymore. I'm not the person I was when I went to college. I'm even not the person I was 13 years ago when I lived in Maryland and worked in DC public schools. Allow people to grow and evolve and not keep reminding them of who they used to be. And I think that's one of the beauties of being an expat, right? Is that you can go to another country and you can decide, you can live in your truth, and there's no one there to remind you of who you used to be.
Yeah.
And that's a way people, I know people do it as a way to connect with you, to show that they knew you, but it's harmful.
Yeah, it's not helpful.
It's not helpful. And we don't, all the time, we don't say it.
Yeah.
But people need to know, if I have grown and I am someone new, don't keep reminding me of who I used to be, because I'm not that person anymore.
And that's, I think the more that we learn to be assertive and again, reframe what assertive actually means,
yes,
the more that we'll do that. And that is a really good segue. I know we're on a time crunch and the conversation has been great, but I have to go back to this notion of psychological safety at work. I know myself personally, I'm dealing with some stuff at work right now. And again, it goes to the whole assertiveness and being able to communicate what you need, boundaries, who you are, really just be able to show up as the fullness of yourself. And in some spaces, how that is not accepted. And I really just want to know your take on what that does mean to be, for those who don't know, have a sense of psychological safety so that you can show up fully and authentically and do good work in these international schools that aren't the most progressive, if we're being honest.
So,
I'm so I know.
Let's see, okay, I'm gonna be honest, because we're about honesty today.
Yeah.
So the truth is, a lot of international spaces are not psychologically safe spaces for Black women. I can only speak as a Black woman. I can't speak as a Black man or a Chinese man or Hispanic man. But from my experience in the 6 schools that I've been in and the one that I'm in right now, they're not always safe psychologically, right? Because I'm not sure that schools even have sat down and thought about what that means, or have even queried their staff to know what it means for them. Because the truth is, psychological safety is different for each of us. Even though you and I are both Black women, it may be different for both of us, right? It's important to show up as your full self. For me, it's this here, it's these African clothes, because all of my clothes, most of them are African and colorful. I don't wear white, I don't wear Black. I'm in red, green, orange. I show up, I got the fancy earrings, sometimes the earrings match the dress. I show up as my full self physically. I don't downplay that anymore, right? So when I walk through the door, people see me coming and this is who I am.
Right.
Now, I would be lying if I say that I always show up as my full self emotionally.
Yeah.
I would be lying. I'm choosing not to lie today because that's been hard in some spaces, because you get the assume best intentions, Cheryl-Ann. When I say someone has done something harmful for me, the person that you report it to or the person who has done that harm is, that wasn't my intent. Assume best intentions. And the truth is,
I hate it.
That statement in itself is not harmful. It's not that the statement is harmful, because you should assume the best intentions of people. You give them the benefit of the doubt, is what we say, right?
Right.
But the truth is, if someone comes and says that they have been harmed by something you've said or done, the appropriate response is not assume best intentions. The appropriate response is, I am sorry. I didn't realize that. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that. Oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that. What can I do differently, right? I wrote this article about apologies to students. Yeah, a couple of years ago, because it was when I was still in Abidjan. And I wrote this article about a student of mine who was upset at me for something, and I won't go all the way into it, but he came in and told me, and I apologized. And when I told a friend the story, she said, well, why did you apologize? You didn't do anything. I said, because it wasn't whether I did something or not. My intent was not important at that point. It was the impact that I had on him. And so I apologized to him because he felt something about something that I did or did not do. We need to start being more comfortable with apologizing to people, taking responsibility for when we've harmed people and saying, I'm sorry. But also, to go further than that, thinking about the impact of what we do and not so being so hung up on the intent, because the intent is just the first step. Yeah. The impact is just the next step. And you have to take accountability for that impact. Whether or not you intended it that way is not the answer, right? So you need to apologize. And that amends can be whatever it is, right? I apologize. I'm sorry that I did that. I didn't mean to do that. In the future, I will, or I will not, right? Because everybody says the best apology is change behavior, and that's true, because apologies are words. But if the behavior doesn't change, that means that the apology was not true, it wasn't sincere. So the next time someone comes and says, hey, you did this and that hurt me, instead of saying, I didn't mean that, you took it the wrong way. Oh, you're so sensitive. All these things that we say that makes the harm worse. Instead, pause, listen, let them finish, and then say, thank you for telling me that. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I harmed you. Yeah. Don't say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, because that, again, is not an apology.
At all.
Love to say, I'm sorry that you feel that way. No, I apologize. No, you didn't. That's not an apology.
It's not.
Take accountability for what you did. And then if you don't know what to do differently, say, what can I do different? And then do it. But stop trying to make your intention
the
most important thing.
So I agree with everything you're saying. And so as a Black woman that is being harmed, what I'm noticing is that a certain demographic of people's feelings are being prioritized over my actual truth. Like a person says they feel a certain way, but I've not actually done anything there's no behavioral antecedent to elicit an emotional response, but it is rooted in racism and the fact that you've not worked with Black people and you don't know how to take, how a Black woman presents. I am struggling with that part. It is really, I think I'm stuck.
It's hard, and the truth is there's no one solution to it. But what I always say is protect yourself. Find who your ally is, because it's important that you have an ally at school, right? Whether it's somebody that you can go and talk to and be like, I can't believe that this is happening. Help me figure out how to do this. Or a person who will then speak up for you.
Yeah.
Right? We need that in schools, because a lot of times when we try to speak up for ourselves, it is taken the wrong way and it's weaponized against us, right? And many of us have had this happen. I've had it happen more often than not. Because when you set a boundary or you say, why did you do that? Then people think that you're being
aggressive,
brisk, or you're accusing me of something or whatever. I'm just relaying how I felt.
Right.
And the truth is, if you find yourself in a space where you're not making any progress, then you need an ally who looks like the person, who understands the person who is causing the harm. So you have to then make yourself vulnerable and reach out for help for somebody who you think can help. Yeah. Right. And that can be hard.
Yeah, it is.
So that's what I would say is sometimes the best route. And it feels bad because you think, why should I have to get somebody else to explain to this person what they're doing is wrong? But that's vulnerability, right? Is asking for help, is saying, I can't get this done myself, so somebody needs to come and help me. And we struggle with that, myself included. But sometimes you have to choose to let somebody else take on that fight for you or help you in that fight, or be the person who goes and speaks up for you.
Yeah.
So hopefully you have such a person in your organization, right? And I think a lot of times we don't want to complain or tell other people because we don't want to get people in trouble. But the truth is, if harm is being done, especially professionally, you need an ally. We have to stop keeping those things to ourselves, myself included. I've left schools instead of asking people for help, right? It's why I've moved around so much. I've decided I'm not going to stay at this school. When 2 years is up, I'm just going to leave.
Yeah.
But maybe I could have asked for help in one of those schools and stayed, right? Maybe I could have had an ally who would have assisted me in dealing with whatever harm I was facing instead of leaving. So while I don't regret leaving any of those places, I think it's important for us to think about who are our allies in our schools who can help us fight when things are happening that are harmful.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I know our time is nigh, but I want to give you an opportunity to share with us how we can follow your journey. Do you have anything coming up that you want us to participate in? How do we stay connected with you?
All right. So I started a consulting business last year in 2020 called Weekes Enterprise, and I'm a counselor. So I do workshops. Mental health, consent is one of my favorite things to talk about. I talk about boundaries. I did the PTC course this summer, which is where you and I met, where we talked about culturally responsive counseling, and that was a lot. Right. You know, it was intense for all of us.
Yeah.
Next month, October 17th and 26th, I am doing a workshop for ISCA Academy. ISCA is the International School Counselors Association, and the topic is on personal relationships and safety, and basically we're talking about consent. How do you teach your children about consent, your students, and so that they can create safer relationships at school and in their communities? So that's through ISCA Academy, and that is coming up. How do you follow me? LinkedIn, Cheryl-Ann Weekes, Weekes Enterprise. Weekes is spelled Weekes. There's an extra E in there. Enterprise.com is my professional website. I am also on IG, but I'm not going to give that to you because, to be honest, since I've been back to work, I probably go on that thing not very often. I've really taken, I think I've taken a little bit of a break from social media. So I'm not posting as much, but on IG, I'm Bajan Expat Counselor, I think it is.
I think so.
But that's what I think it is. Yeah, I don't get on there very often, but LinkedIn and my website are the places you'll find me the most. And yeah, search for me. You can look at my blog. I haven't posted on that blog probably in about a year, but I used to have a blog where I talked about my expat experiences and my travel. I think the last time I posted on that blog was more than a year ago. But if you're interested in looking at how I got started, try the blog. It's the same thing, Bajan Expat Counselor. And I'll give you all the links so you can post those. Yeah, so that's where you find me.
I am so grateful. Like, thank you so much, Cheryl-Ann, for imparting your wisdom, your knowledge with us today. I always learn when I listen to you, and I get to go kind of rethink some things on how to move forward in certain situations. And so for everyone that's watching, I want to thank you again for tuning into the Black Expat Experience. I know that you got something from this conversation, and I can't wait to hear what it's been. I encourage you to keep taking risks, keep impacting your communities, and as always, prioritize your mental health. Please share this in your communities of influence, and Until next time, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great talking to you. Have a great day.